we are pragmatic, that we must have all these nice theories in our minds, of course, but it is important that we don't think that we can ever develop an overarching framework for thinking for all time. I'm amazed sometimes at some of the reports that I've read about an exercise that I took part in, namely shaping Ghana's economic recovery program. And I find the most frustrations with the intellectuals because they seem to be looking for, so who were the brains in Ghana's economic recovery program? And they can't believe that a group of Ghanaians actually looked at the context where we've come from and then devised something which may be eclectic, but which fitted the bill. So people begin to project backwards and forwards. When did the Washington Consensus emerge? And when you see a program that had started before that, I still see people fitting Ghana's economic recovery program into something yet to develop fully. I find accounts that are made about Ghana's economic recovery program, which will say that even the World Bank said that this was owned by the Ghanaian people. And yet, I find intellectuals who want to dispute it cannot have been owned by the Ghanaian people. The fault with ownership is a confusion which is sometimes deliberate, because in the nature of relationships between governments and various bodies, government ownership gets to be confused with country ownership. And sometimes I think this is deliberate, because it keeps those with influence exactly where they want to be. The reality of Ghana in 1982-83 is very clear. Cocoa really is what Ghana was made up of for most of the 20th century. And when, for various reasons, political, economic policy making, we overtaxed the cocoa industry and killed it, then the foreign exchange constraint became the most binding problem on us. A lot of the industries that had been started off, sometimes we describe as import license industries, were conferring huge amounts of rents to those who can use their positions to gain access to underpriced foreign exchange. And this really was what was contributing to bringing the Ghanaian economy as it was by the end of the 80s, by the end of the 70s, to its knees. The Ghanaian economy had collapsed. The state itself had become like a vampire. And therefore, when I find people still quoting A or B about the proper role of the state and so on, I don't know whether they're writing a book or whether they are trying to solve a problem. For us who crafted the Ghana Economic Recovery Program, the issue of the role of the state as against opening up to markets was a pragmatic issue. You can't wish things in place when the state was a contributory predator to what was happening. When the state itself and its functionaries were exploiting everything they could have. What is this talk about the optimal mix between state intervention and markets? The critical thing that we faced in the country at that time was how to make sure we improved on the allocation of scarce resources. That was the most important thing, and it did not matter what may have worked anywhere. Like Ishak had said when he gave this sketch of a relatively authoritarian state and what would work in that type of institutional arrangement as against a slide, that was closer to what we had. The main thing that I saw over that period was how to actually institutionalize a personality, because the attack on corruption the attack on rent-seeking in Ghana at that time was more a function of, if you like, the personality of Rawlings. So with that, we could begin to craft openings to the market, which would improve, because the bureaucracy had just been seeking rent and misusing political positions for advantage. So the important thing was, how do we make sure that we pushed corruption and rent-seeking at bay whilst we got on with the job? So that's the first thing, that the diagnostics matter. And what is doable depends on your overall institutional arrangement. And it's up to you to find what would work in your particular environment. And if the theoreticians don't recognize it, that's fine. Then we get to why is it that the reform process, the growth that spurted, how come that it seemed to have slowed down in the early 90s? Well, one of the other things about Ghana, which is a little different from Asia, is that we are a very low savings economy. It became very bad during the time of the economic collapse. But we are not like Asia in terms of our savings propensities. And therefore, we tend to have these huge savings investment gaps, even though I do believe that it was a foreign exchange constraint that had become binding. And therefore, people also forget that there was a lot, it's not just getting prices right. There were lots of actual investments in rehabilitating cocoa farms and oil plantations and so on. So people forget all of those things, and they just characterize things like trying to get prices right. The Cocoa Marketing Board was not abolished. So what is this about? About people looking for their solutions in other people's work. So it is important that in an interactive way, developments outside a small country like Ghana can be very important. And that is really what showed up in the period of the early 90s in Ghana, because for a number of reasons, the donor support to Ghana dwindled in the period of the 90s, and that contributed to a slowdown in the growth. But you can again see that when we got into 2001 and beyond, as things like HIPIC initiative, debt cancellation, debt relief freed more resources, growth picked up again. So that is something that is important all the time, and it also illustrates another thing, that your binding constraints change. So people search for frameworks and formulae and so on, but you will miss the boat because things do change. It could be terms of trade developments are different, and so you may find that you've got to always be thinking again at what is emerging as the more difficult thing to deal with. You can't just want to have a formula that works for all time. It's not true. The economy is too dynamic, and the forces that interact and impact on must be something that the people who are trying to come up with policy responses must be forever keeping an eye on things as they develop. So if it's a framework for thinking that is important, not a fixed static framework that will fit a particular economy. So that is my second thing, that the diagnostics will change, and therefore the policies will change. And therefore some people may be disappointed that they may not necessarily be seeing the same things being followed. There is a price to pay for that. So the diagnostics are important, and you must be willing to be making such amendments that would seem to be more targeted at the evolving problems that come up, and not see comfort in something for all time. I'm also saying that for a small country like Ghana, exogenous shocks come all the time, and they impact on the economy and begin to change attitudes and behaviors and so on. And thirdly, that for a country like Ghana, it is not going to be, you cannot internalize everything. Ghana is too small. So we need to find ways and means of taking the risk of getting the Ghanaian economy sufficiently integrated into the world economy. The Ghanaian economy is too small to be the source of the growth. And I believe that the next phase really for Ghana, sadly enough for some people, because whether by mistake or not, we're going to have to go back to cocoa and use the advantage, in my view, of oil, gold, perhaps the South-South cooperation, I wonder what will happen if the Chinese started eating a lot of chocolates as they get richer. And that is why we will return to cocoa. And cocoa will have to form the base of moving on, so more Ghanaians don't have to be cocoa farm laborers or cocoa farm owners, but work upstream in further development of products. That is the challenge that Ghana faces. There will be other industries, but I think, as I look down the road, that the next big transformation is how to get cocoa. With high-tech cocoa, Ghana this year may produce, don't ask me about the Ivorian effect, but about 900,000 tons plus of cocoa in the crop year 2010, 2011. And we cannot sit down and watch. If it wasn't for China, then prices would be plummeting right now. So it is important that we return to cocoa, that we devote some of these resources and grow a cocoa economy, which we destroyed Ghana when we tried to destroy that particular thing. I thank you very much.